Seregios is the flagship of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. He is a gold-coloured flying wyvern with sharp scales all over his body. Seregios is formally introduced in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate's high rank story. In most Monster Hunter games, the story tries to build a personal rivalry between you and a specific individual version of a flagship monster. But not Seregios. You encounter him once and beat him almost immediately a short time later. However, it turns out there's many more. Hundreds of them invade the land and begin to constantly appear during hunts. Yes, Seregios in 4 Ultimate is an invader and can appear in every locale in the game. Seregios attacks primarily by shooting his blade scales and striking with his legs, using his talons to rip into his enemies. He moves around on all fours, with his wing arms on the ground. This makes him pretty fast while walking around, and he's also a very adept flyer. Seregios can attack by standing above you and striking down with his talons. He can also fly towards you while swinging his talons, either in a straight line or in an arc. He can also strike down while hovering in the air. Other attacks will have him rush forward in a tackle or flick his tail around. Seregios' blade scales are extremely sharp, and he can fire them as projectiles from his head. When his talons or scales strike you, 2 after explosions will occur, stunning and knocking you back, with the second hit having a high chance of inflicting bleed, a status newly introduced with Seregios. When you're bleeding, moving around, attacking or evading will have your health drain very quickly. The only cure is to either eat some meat or crouch for several seconds, both of which are fairly dangerous options with a monster as erratic as Seregios. The multi-hit attacks are dangerous because they interrupt your current action, making it harder to dodge the final hits that inflicts bleed. But there is a narrow window where you can dodge your guard. So long as you don't panic, you should be okay. Whenever Seregios roars, his scales ruffle around like feathers on a bird, and these scales extend whenever he becomes enraged. When this is the case, he will perform his arc attack twice in a row. He also has a pin attack initiated by flying in a huge arc towards you. This one is interesting because after striking you on the ground, Seregios will throw you. If you're playing with palicos or other people, he'll throw you at them directly, and vice versa. All of this makes the Seregios fight pretty dynamic, as the two of you constantly move around. His attacks causing multiple hits means you need to be ready to dodge at a moment's notice, and the new bleed mechanic adds a lot of tension as you struggle to avoid taking further damage. I've broken down his moveset, but one thing I must stress is that he doesn't really have dedicated combos. It almost feels as if Seregios does whatever attack whenever he wants. For example, after swiping his claws in an arc attack, if he's directly above you, he can immediately strike down with his claws or back away while firing projectiles. At a moment's notice, he will leap into the air and aim his claws towards you. He's always ready to do any attack at any moment. The saving grace is that while the majority of his attacks involve his legs, they are also very susceptible to taking damage. Seregios is one of the first monsters in the series to have a super powered up state, as he overcame Shigaru Magala's Frenzy Virus to become the Apex Seregios. This one is massive, his eyes are glowing red, and purple smoke is constantly coming from his body. Like all Apex monsters, only his weak points can be hit without your weapon deflecting, unless you use a dry Vice Stone. Apex Seregios fires blade scales from many more attacks, including his tackle, arc attack, and tail flicks. Seregios also appears in Monster Hunter Generations. In this game, he is no longer an invader, and so he only appears in desert and volcano regions. In G-Rank, he fires blade scales from the same attacks that Apex Seregios would, making him much more dangerous. He can also do a new attack where he rushes towards you from the air. Seregios later returned for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this game, he has an updated moveset, theme, and appearance. He also appears in forest regions in addition to the desert. Bleed has been reworked in Sunbreak. Now the damage it inflicts will remain as a purple segment on your health bar. This can be healed back by curing bleed, or removed by taking more damage, and of course bleed can be cured in the same old ways too. Seregios can do the Generations rush towards you from the air twice, back to back. His old sideways sweep has been changed, as now he will spin around in the air before flying towards you, skidding on the ground. He can also do a different strike, where he flies up before rapidly flying down, and when he's enraged, he will do both strikes back to back. His fired scales will remain on the ground, serving as temporary bleeding hazards. After firing scales from his head, he will immediately turn and fire them from his tail. Seregios can also flick his tail while rising in the air before firing scales downwards. When severing Seregios' tail in 4 Ultimate, a huge chunk would come off, leaving him with a stump. Severing it in Sunbreak will merely have a spike fall off, leaving the tail mostly intact. His pin attack no longer has him grab you. Instead, he knocks you to the ground and immediately fires blade scales, killing you if you don't wire fall. His old sweep attack is not present in Sunbreak. So normally in the series we cover multiple iterations of the same monster over time, so when I think about who is the best, I have around on average 3 choices, not to mention variants and subspecies. This time there's only 2, and unless you want to count Apex Seregios there's no variants. So considering we only have 4 Ultimate and Sunbreak Seregios to talk about, I would like to talk about how Sunbreak downgraded Seregios. And no, I'm not just talking about his moveset. In 4 Ultimates and Generations, Seregios weapons would have the unique feature where rolling multiple times in a row would automatically sharpen the weapon. This was a pretty cool feature that fit well with Seregios considering his blade scales are so sharp. It also made his weapons a good choice for those who rely on dodging a lot, and it overall made Seregios feel more special. The sharpness of his weapons were always maxed out too, and while the actual sharpness levels were narrow, the gimmick made it work well. Neither the self-sharpening or maxed out sharpness bar are in Sunbreak. Seregios weapons are just normal with raw damage, but there's way more better options to pick from, especially because their sharpness and slots are merely average. The lack of self-sharpening is made worse by the fact that other weapons in Sunbreak do have unique features. Flaming Espinas weapons deal poison and fire damage both, Velkhana weapons have better frostcraft, and Chaotic Gore Magala weapons have negative affinity without the Frenzy virus, which becomes positive when you overcome it. This specific feature of Chaotic Gores was in 4 Ultimate too, and it's a shame how that feature was brought back but not Seregios's. I suppose those features came back because those monsters are all endgame Elder Dragon equivalent in terms of power, while Seregios is in Master Rank 4, so maybe the developers thought his weapon could be crafted too early for such a powerful feature. In 4 Ultimate, Seregios weapons had 2 forms, with the second one looking more revised and much cooler. In Sunbreak, only the first is present. To be honest, I don't think any individual weapon has 2 substantial designs like that in Sunbreak, so I can see why they didn't make an exception for Seregios. Technically, they tried doing the Seregios weapon evolution on a larger scale for a ton of Monster Hunter World weapons, and it didn't really work out well at all. Regardless, it's still a shame. In some cases, the upgraded weapons would have special features. The upgraded hammer did not have a unique design, but charging up would cause the scales to protrude, just like how they do on Seregios. The upgraded greatsword would be folded when sheathed, and would unfold when unsheathed. Both these features are not present in Sunbreak. Then there's the fight itself. I feel like most monsters brought into Sunbreak were implemented very well. So was Seregios, but in a lot of ways he is lacking compared to his 4U self. For example, that version was extremely erratic in how he attacked. He was crazy, constantly striking from different angles, and it felt like he didn't really have dedicated combos. It felt like he could do anything at any time, and this was all balanced by his legs being very weak. So as long as you were as aggressive as he was, things would be fine. The Sunbreak Seregios feels a lot more straightforward. He will always strike towards you twice in a row. He will always perform a fast strike after a sideways strike. These consistent combos all feel like variations of the same attack, and it makes him feel less interesting. He lost the old arc attack, which was really threatening too. He just feels far more predictable in this game, and I don't really like the bleed changes either. The way it worked in 4 Ultimate and World was so much more dangerous, and this rework was not good at all. I also think it was high time for something new, like a subspecies or variant, but that didn't happen. If you don't count Apex Seregios, he has received nothing since his introduction, making him and Velkhana the only flagships to basically be alone. Even the Generations flagships had the deviants. Did we really need a 4th Mizutsune in Sunbreak? To be honest though, he's probably not the simplest monster to give a subspecies, since he doesn't have an element. What would it do that the original couldn't? Fire more blade scales? I've often wondered if taking Apex Seregios and turning him into his own variants would be a good idea. Having a non-Megala monster with a Frenzy virus could be interesting, and I do think he looks really cool. I'm interested to see what everyone else thinks. Overall, one thing that really impressed me about 4 Ultimate Seregios was that pretty much every single attack animation was unique to him. Animation reuse is not a bad thing at all, but it was really refreshing to fight a flying wyvern who fights unlike anyone else in the entire game. Even his tail swing is different to the others. His aggression keeps the fight fast paced, but the fact that his legs take so much damage balances the whole thing out. He's a great monster, and I hope they give him something new in the future. The Sunbreak iteration is not a bad fight, but I don't think it really fully captured what made the original so good. What do you all think of Seregios? Do you prefer the Sunbreak or full Ultimate version? What kind of variant or subspecies would you give him? Let me know in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe, and have a good day.